Hi guys, welcome. Today we have a special treat for you. I have with us Francois, Manuel, and Michál. We are analyzing a song in Spanish, but with its English translation though. Michál, can you tell us about the song?
Yes. So since I grew up in a Spanish-speaking country, Dominican Republic, I grew up with a family that loves to listening to romantic songs. And I grew up with listening to romantic songs, and a lot of those songs they left an imprint in me that till this day I still go back and I listen to. And they were dark songs. Like these songs were very very uh we're talking about going down to the deepest possible way to express the love of your life, and or to express the loss of your life, or anything really really miserable that you have encountered, but in a loving way, and it just standing like a torero, like a bullfighter. Here I am, I'm still standing, and my love for this bull, even after I kill it, is going to remain. And it was really powerful. And I had a couple of songs. This is not my favorite song, but this is the song that actually expresses the totality of all those songs in the best way. Because I wanted to find a song that I can share with you and the people who are watching us, where how meaningful these songs are to me and how they help me through my life.
Wow. Expressing love more strongly in a song, coming from the environment where love is a safe haven, let's say. When the life is so difficult that love is the escape from it somehow. Yeah. Could you read that in original?
Yes. This song is by Manolo Galván, and it is named Poema del Alma. El mundo es un pobre poema que solo recita el alma. Dame el pan que sobra en tu mesa. Dame el vino que sobra en tu jarra, que si viene de tus manos tan blancas, no me parecen migajas. Si un día cansada de besos, tus pasos te traen a mi casa, yo sabré comprender tu silencio y esperar tus migajas mañana. El mundo no entiende de amores, el mundo no entiende de nada. El mundo es un pobre poema que solo recita el alma. La-la-la-lai-lai-lai-lai. El mundo es un pobre poema que solo recita el alma. Amores igual que canciones, dolores igual que sonatas. Todos flotan en el aire y son poemas del alma. Y el alma no entiende mis versos. Se vende si quieres comprarla. El alma se creyó que los besos eran peludios de calma. Y es que el mundo no entiende de versos. El mundo no entiende de nada. El mundo es un pobre poema que solo recita el alma. Durmiendo yo tuve dos sueños. Soñando yo hablaba en voz alta, y mi voz se perdió entre la noche, y mis sueños murieron al alba. Y mis sueños se hicieron mayores. La noche olvidó mis palabras, y, y mi cuarto pintado de negro lloró mi poema de alma. Y es que el mundo no entiende de sueños, el mundo no entiende de nada. El mundo es un pobre poema que solo recita el alma. El mundo es un pobre poema que solo recita mi alma.
Mm. Beautiful. Okay.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
The chorus and the song is very important because he changes just one little word and it grows into something else. And you will see that when you're reading it. That I've always when I first heard this song, I was a teenager, or I wasn't not just a teenager, but I was a young kid, less than 10, and my mom used to play this song a lot. And then when I came to Dominican Republic, I mean, when I came to the U.S. from Dominican Republic, my father used to listen to that song, and I just played it nonstop. And I found it really fascinating how he was able to make the song and grow, like go from how it started and then how it ended. I always found that really fascinating. And the chorus just plays along with this serenading uh uh the challenges that he's trying to figure out in the song with the poem.
Poor is the world, which in solitude the soul recites its poetry. So the sense I get from there is that the poetry is meant to be shared. When there's a world where the poetry is recited within the soul and not shared among people, that is a way to count yourself poor.
Poor is the world which in solitude the soul recites its poetry. So maybe there's a richness that could be in the world that's not in the world. When in solitude the soul recites its poetry. So yeah, I'm getting like a man whose soul is reciting poetry alone and seeing an impoverished world somehow.
That's how I understood it.
For me, this line, it's so powerful, because how can poetry being so beautiful not be heard? And it's something that I meditate on a lot. And I've written a lot of poems, and I don't share it. I don't share it with the world. I don't share it. It's really fascinating. And I do it alone. And when I look at this first line, I think about the experiences of our beauty in the world and how we don't know how to show it, and we try to hide it. And that's it's something that for me has always been a conflict with how to be people deceiving and trying to hide their potential. So like Manuel said in France, that it's what makes it's in us hiding the quality of what we can be, uh, uh, and when we are struggling, we only focus so much on the negativity. So this verse here, so I used to have the cassette, and I used to just stay just thinking about this. Poor is the world, which in solitude the soul recites its poetry. And some days they were really hard. We didn't have food, or my father was physically abusing me or whatever, and all that stuff. Like I just stay there, like you be my father, right? Or you be my loved one. How could you treat me like this, right? So there's a lot like about that beauty of relationship that comes to me when I see this line a lot.
Like our creativity, those little kind of sparks of expression that we put, and poetry is art of the word, not art of a hand, let's say. Like sometimes it's the only weapon we have. Yeah. And when it's not heard, like if only the soul recites it, others don't hear it, because others hear the spoken word or the action and stuff. The poetry is something very sacred outside.
So for me, poetry is what people do
Mm-hmm.
and what they mean by that. So this poem, it's a lot of expressions that I experienced through people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the song is very meaningful to me.
Gorgeous.
Give me the bread that's left over on your table. Give me the wine that's left over in your jug. That, if it's guided by your hands, they don't appear to me to be leftover crumbs. So, first thing that stands out to me is wine and bread, right, which is a biblical reference where you partake in the other, right? So in some sense, it's symbolizing the partaking in the other that's freely given, and that the freely given part of the other is what gives the meaning, right? Like it's transcending the materiality of the leftoverness, right? Like the lack of material sustenance, but it's sustenance for the soul that's been given.
I really like the image of someone getting leftovers and not even perceiving the leftovers as leftovers because of how grateful they are for receiving it from a specific person.
Yeah, that's good. So again, for me, going back to the poetry of what people are, and tying it back to what Franz and Manuel said, that is correct. Like when I used to witness the most horrible things in the world, and somehow something within me still wanted to accept them, like you said, Franz, and be able to figure out a way to forgive them. So yeah, that's something I think a lot about. And I was very young when I was listening to this and experienced horrible things. And then this song just made me think about, just keep giving it to me, you know, when sometimes we didn't have food, or sometimes we struggle with the issues of my mother being an alcoholic, and we were around horrible people. There was this extension of myself that I was willing to still accept, right? Because I wanted to still see the good in people, even though it was hard.
This is the song that your mom listened a lot, right? That when you hear words from your hands, that if it's guided by your hands, does it associate with your mom for you?
It associates with anyone that extends the goodwill.
Oh.
It's anyone that was willing to, even after they made a mistake, was willing to go back and 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 still give me part of their way of apologizing. Even it didn't have to be with words. It could be just opening the door, a cup of water, or letting us sleep over, or helping me with my asthma and stuff like that.
Bread and wine that you left. So leftover is also something that you left for me. That's what I think, because it's a sharing thing. Like that's what I feel. Like I would project on it. I will. Somebody drinks wine, they usually don't leave it. There is no leftover. It goes till the end. And if there is bread left, then this means either there should have been enough to begin with, or it's left for you. If it's guided by your hand, it was left there on purpose for me. Like it was, you thought of it when you ate the bread and when there is wine, to leave some for me. And this way, it's not a leftover. You thought to leave it for me. It's more than extended hand, right? It's a thought. It's a, that's why I kind of felt this also motherly energy. This one made me think about my friend from the church, Mary, which I used to know back in the day. She would keep, they would not have much food, but she always would keep part of the food to give to other people. Like she would make sure whatever they had to be divided in half, and it's not a leftover, it's something that she left for others. It was not left, like it's a different meaning of leftover. So I was thinking if it's in Spanish, might mean that meaning or not, that it's something that you leave for others, or if it's something like that that remained because you did not want it.
Well, in the poem, it means that if you willingly gave me what's left over, it means more, because at least you thought of me instead of dismissing me.
No, yeah, I was thinking more leaving on purpose part of your food for you, even that. So it's more of a sharing thing. Okay, guys, would you like to address that?
Yeah, I'll add something. I guess I grew up quite privileged, so we never had problems with not enough food around. There's always been more than enough food. But I did think of a funny story. One of my old high school friends called me about a week or two ago, just feeling lonely, and he was telling me like how much he appreciated my friendship in high school and whatever. But he gave me a list, like to express to me like what a great friend I am. He sort of gave me the list, like when I'm feeling this lonely, like I call number 1, then I call number 2, then I call number 3, then I call number 4, and those are the only people I ever call. And yeah, okay, not to call you out for being number 4, you're not like last in the line or anything, but yeah, you're number 4. So I thought I'm like the leftover crumb. But it was still nice. I didn't feel like an insult, even though it's like the worst of my best friends. I think that's the closest in my recent experience that I've had someone sort of do something that's nice and sort of maybe relates in some way to leftover, but it's not I don't think it's entirely in the spirit of the song. I'm just sort of mining my experience for anything that's remotely related.
Yeah, that's about right. Like even if you're at the bottom of the list, to you it feels much bigger, right? Because you're looking at the good, right? Because that's what going back to Manuel said. It's any, just because you think this is a leftover. No, to me this is more than that, right? Because at least you're offering your hand, you're extending your hand, right? You're you're seeing me for who I am, and I'm willing to see you as well, right? Like it's a mutual understanding of each other.
I mean, he included him on the list. It's already something. like you got to be that number 4 as opposed to not being thought of at all, right? And that's the friendship part that I was thinking about, right? That what he did is, it doesn't matter what number you are in there, you are on the list, on being called a friend, and it doesn't matter if you're even number 10. Yeah.
If one day the kisses become tiresome, and along the way your steps guide you to my home, I'll learn to comprehend your silence, and I'll wait for what remains of you at dawn. So yeah, this is a bit more complicated on first look. So the first line is about habitualization, not seeing what you saw previously. Lingering sense that I get. Appreciation from afar, a lack of participation in the interaction, right? Like there's a growing away from each other. I'll wait for you, for what remains of you at dawn. So that can mean two things, right? Like there's a yearning, right? Where you got an impression and you're still holding on to that impression, or so someone is getting drunk and you're waiting them to come home, like drunk and out of their mind, and like you still want to have intimacy with that person.
Yeah, that's pretty good. For me, it was a bit challenging to translate it, the way the song and the rhythm and the way it was sang. But if one day the kisses become tiresome, for me, that means when you're done playing around with whatever it is that you're playing around, just know that I'll be here, and I'll learn from whatever it is that you're bringing with you, just by learning to be quiet. And then tomorrow we could talk about the real problems that you could bring in, that I might be able to be help you with, because it's a new day.
Yeah, I'm thinking a little bit of someone who maybe used to share more, so more kisses and more affection, and then the kisses went away and maybe the talking became less. And the poet here is saying, well, even if the kisses dry up and even if the words dry up, like I'll learn to comprehend your silence. I'll learn to be with what's left, even when what's left becomes less.
I'm thinking about a promise of acceptance, despite it doesn't matter, whatever that phrase, I will wait for what remains of you at dawn. Like the person who the poet waits for comes back at dawn. The steps will guide you to my home. I will wait for you at dawn. I will wait for you no matter what I do or what you do. I will not ask questions. When I see, I will learn to comprehend your silence. There will be no questions asked. I will wait for you. That's a very powerful acceptance here. This is a very strong expression of love and understanding another person. Basically, no matter what. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Nodrik, while you spoke, it only dawned on me that the person is probably going out at night and staying out all night and only returning at dawn. That escaped me.
Yeah, I'm seeing the acceptance actually going a little bit into the dark side, right? Like there's a lack of agency there, right? Like there's a fatalistic element I feel there, because there's no action, right? Like there's no reparation of what's lost.
Yeah, that that is very true. A lot of the songs, romantic songs I listen to, are exactly what you just said, Manuel. And this, something very, very powerful that Spanish poems have a lot, and I grew up with. Exactly that, what you just said.
So then we get to the chorus. Misunderstood is the world about loving. Misunderstood is the world about nothingness. Poor is the world, which in solitude the soul recites its poetry. So yeah, so it's pointing at the wrong thing. People, the misunderstanding is that people are relating to the wrong aspect, right? Like they assigning importance to the wrong things. They're misconstruing what love is. Yeah, Michál, you want to say something about the word nothingness, because it's a little bit strange to me.
Well, in the way that I see nothingness, or especially with the song, is that even when there's nothing, or let's say there's that deepness that makes us numb, people don't understand that. Like that dullness, or that being in the hole.
Mm-hmm. So you, the nothingness is like an absence of intimacy.
Right.
So we are back to the poet who alone recites the poems. It's about love, but also about nothingness. I guess the fatalistic ideas already creeping in as a development into the song. Yeah.
I'm quite interested in why the poet says, like, the poet says misunderstood is the world about loving and misunderstood is the world about nothingness. Those two sound like two distinct feelings. And I'm just quite kind of curious, when he says misunderstood, is it misunderstood in general about the nature and the workings of those feelings? Is it misunderstood about his own loving and his own experience of feeling of nothingness? Is it the lessons the world taught him that is now unhelpful in his own loving and his own experience of nothingness?
I think if he would be understood, then he wouldn't be alone. That's the point in here. That's just what I think. Like, it feels so strong that if others would understand it, I would not be alone. That's what I feel it represents. What do you guys think?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it
Yeah.
just like Manuel said, it in its misplacement of what love is. Like I grew up with people telling me that they love me, but then they used to do things that were really not aligned with what I thought was love. Uh, and and their ability to be intimate with me was all about taking advantage of me, especially as a child. But it's that misplacement of what love is, that what Manuel was talking about earlier, and I kept meditating on that. Like my father broke my ribs, and then the next morning he used to say, "I love you." Right? Like, what is that? Or people who are really smart and take advantage of people who are not. Like, what is that? Is that love? So it's always a battle for me. It's always an issue for me that I'm constantly having to work on, because it's hard for me to understand what people mean by love. Because the there's what they say, and then there's what they do.
Oh, wow.
Right, and to respond to what Nodrik is saying, like you can even feel the love inside of you, right? And you can act it out in the world, but you can also not understand it at the same time, right? Like you can live it without understanding it. So I think the lack of understanding can point into the world, but it can also point towards yourself.
Yeah, that's why I found this song so meaningful for me, and I'm trying to hold that crying, but it's very, very. It was part of my being in every experience that I always reflected on this song. With good relationships, bad relationships, great discourse, no great discourse. Like that, this song is a grounding to my fatalistic way of looking at the world.
The Spanish word amores, is that usually mostly referred to the way people treat each other, or is that mostly referred to the way people feel about each other, or is it like both and complicated?
I grew up with just people saying it, so I'm not sure if people, people just said it. Whatever it wasn't what I see now, what true love is, which is what Javiveki talks about, agape.
What love is not like the songs? What sorrow is not like sonatas? They all float in the air, and the soul inspired their poetry. So I'm getting a little bit of the music being a bit ephemeral and unreal, surreal, whereas contrasted for me with the soul that's inspiring the music is where the real love and the real sorrow sits. It's just what I'm getting from that.
Yeah, so in the way that I always looked at this was that in our attempt to call whatever it is that we feel love, it's just another song. Like we treat it like it's another song, and we treat every feeling like it's just like the many songs, but we forget that the soul is what matters, right? We forget that the person is what matters, and again, like it's something that the very, very like that I relate with very deeply because of my experiences, and it is something that I always meditate on. There will always be another song, but the soul of the person that wrote it is what matters.
Yeah, I'm taking a little bit different take. Like the feeling that I get is it's kind of criticizing songs and sonatas, right? It's like what do you really capture, right? Like they're puffed up air, right? And what really matters is when you're able to embody it, when you're able to live it out, right? Like when it's purified through your soul, then it becomes real, right? Like then the feelings and your participation in the world, they bring magic into it, right? Like they enchant the song, right? And then the song gains its power, right? Like so through the transformation of the soul, these things become meaningful.
I understand that it's a soul of a poet, and he sees poems and sonatas float in the air through love and even in sorrows. So poetry is the expression of the soul here, and everything that happens to the poet is, if you let it go through your soul, becomes poetry. I don't think it's a criticism of it though. It just says, like, as a poet, I see poetry everywhere, even in the sorrow. But love becomes a song. That's the way I see it.
The questions are quite interesting to me, like what love is not like the songs and what sorrow is not like the sonatas. I don't know if there's an insinuation that there's perhaps no love that isn't captured in some kind of song, or like there's no sorrow that hasn't been captured in some kind of sonata, or whether it's maybe a recognition that there is love that isn't like anything captured in any song, or there is sorrow that isn't like anything captured in any sonata. I'm not sure about where those questions are coming from, or whether they're like rich questions that could be coming from several places. Yet the soul misunderstands my verses. It's for sale to whom desires to buy it, since the soul believed that the kisses would prelude the becoming of calmness. So in this section, there seems to be something in the verses that even the soul doesn't get. And so the soul seems to be somehow less in touch with reality than the verses, maybe. So that's maybe throwing some light on what I asked about the questions. So a specific way in which the soul seems to be confused is thinking that the kisses would lead to like a calm state, like a nirvana, maybe like a happily ever after that isn't real. Based on what Michál said about Spanish love songs, maybe in Spanish the verses are quite explicit about that sort of happily ever after it not being real.
Well,
oh. I'm guessing.
So the sense that I get is that there's an aspiration or at least a suggestion that's being raised by the song, right? And it's people are trying to get something from the song, and in the trying to get it out, they're picking and choosing what parts of the song to relate, and they want to see the end of their sorrow or their struggle or whatever in the love, right? Like, but he's effectively saying like, no, like that's not how it works. Like, and he's already alluded to it before, right? Like, he's effectively waiting for his love to come home, or her love, whatever. And there's this being lostness in there, right? Which is not suited by the kisses, right? Like there's something else going on.
Yeah, the this line, it to me tells me a lot about how we misunderstand when when we do things for the good, and then people take it, flip it, or they're misunderstanding what is it that is being asked. And a lot of times we do things for in the name of the material way of looking at the world, and we're thinking that's going to solve the problem, but it doesn't. It's a at the end we find out that trying to look at things from a material way is not going to make the things better. It's not going to calm down the issues, no matter how much money you put into it. And for me, I go back to my father. My father was the breadwinner in our family, and he used to buy our calmness after his storm. Right? And I can say the same thing about my mom drinking, and the same thing about most of my struggles. People always try to buy their way out, and they think it'll calm them, but it doesn't.
Okay. So I project here. Maybe not necessarily how the author meant it. The soul, he separates here from the soul. He's the poet. His soul desires to come down. Like his soul is screaming basically inside of him. And he seeks for the comfort. The soul seeks comfort and believes that maybe kisses might solve it. The soul is for sale here to whoever wants to give him the calmness. And the soul doesn't understand what the poet wants, perhaps. Even the soul misunderstands somehow. Yeah, that's what I project here.
That's good. Can't wait to watch the video. I'm gonna save this one. I'm gonna favorite this video. That song is being replaced by a video.
All right, then, and it's due to the world's misunderstanding of verses, the misunderstanding of nothingness. Poor is the world which in solitude the soul recites its poetry.
So yeah, the distinction that's being made here is the misunderstanding of nothingness, right, which is connected to the intimacy again, is no longer related to the world, right? Like now it's related to himself more so, I think, at this point. And the word due is introduced in relation to verses, and that's also changed from love to verses, right? So I guess the verses are the thing that holds the love, right? And there's a causal relationship between the misunderstanding of the verses and the missing understanding of the nothingness, right? Like so there's a translation error that I see here, where there's a wanting of how the world is, and then there's the experience of the actual world.
Yeah, that fits with participatory. and right, they're going back to what people say and how they act, right? And again, for me, poetry is what people embody, right? That that for me is very important, not what you say, because what you say is just like Manuel is talking about. It's not. It doesn't fit for me. It doesn't work. And I always like again. I find so much to reflect on these passages in the song, because in my experiences of trying to understand how to be, it was really difficult to find myself.
I'm seeing a bit of a link between this chorus and the last verse, where it was talking about the soul being misunderstood, and then it is due to the world's misunderstanding of verses, and a misunderstanding of nothingness. Sort of saying that the soul internalized the world's misunderstanding, or the soul is misunderstood because the world is misunderstood. I'm wondering, is the soul reciting in solitude because the world is misunderstood?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
All right, so while sleeping, I had two dreams. Dreaming, I voiced aloud, but through the night my voice got lost, and by dawn, deceased were my dreams. So older my dreams grew, while the night forgot my words, yet my black painted room wept for my soul's poetry.
This is probably one of my favorite verses of the whole song, because how many times I've been in my room looking at the wall and I felt like it talked to me, and how many times that I had a dream of the possibility of getting out and how that happened. And it just stayed there in the room. I couldn't do anything.
Yeah. I get the sense that it's talking about time and how time is taking away the power of things, right? Like they might be really salient, right? Like important to you in the moment, and then time passes, and then other things take their place, and then the night forgot my words, right? Like, so it's faded in meaninglessness, and then it's talking about a black painted room, right? Which is it's really dark, right? Like it's maybe also his retreat inside of himself, right? Like going closing himself off from the world, right? Like when you close your eyes, you have your black painted room where you're in, and then there's a longing there, right? Like there's a what should or could be, what is not, and you just have to face yourself at night every time again.
I think that he screamed so much every night, year by year, until the room became black painted, and even his soul could not produce poetry anymore. So it talks about going dark, wept for my soul's poetry. The black painted room already wept for my soul's poetry. I think he is the black painted room now. Like he's this place that holds a soul. I think he talks about himself. Like the room is him. And that room wept for the poetry. So yeah, he's the room here. While sleeping, I had two dreams.
I get the sense that there's two voices as well, right? Like, so there's this voice of his soul, and then the voice of him screaming at night, or at least voicing his dreams, right? Like the dramatic version of that. And they both dimmed.
Michal knows the right answer.
Oh no, there is no right answer. you don't want the right answer. You want to get out.
Really?
The answer is out.
So like I'm picking up on the dreaming I voiced aloud. So like the song is about this guy who is reciting poetry in solitude, and the world wouldn't understand his verses or whatever. And at night when he dreams, he can say the things that's on his chest aloud. He can speak his verses. But like through the night, through his dreams, those verses get lost again. His voice gets lost again. And when he wakes up in the morning, he can no longer speak his verses to the world, to the real world, to the waking world. And as his voice gets lost, like he's dreaming, he needs to say these things. And as that goes away, so the dream goes away, like that is the dream. And as his dreams die of like, oh, I can never say that to anyone, like that will never be expressed. His dreams grow older, like less vital, I guess, slower, grayer, less colorful. And the nights forget his words, like his words, since they were never spoken to anyone and they're forgotten by him, they just kind of fade into nothingness.
Yeah, so I want to bring this back to a part earlier in the song. And along the way, your steps guide you to my home, and I'll wait for what remains of you at dawn. Right? So he's now talking about his experience during that night, waiting, right, for the return. And whose return is he waiting for? Is he waiting for his soul's return or for a person's return?
Yet it's due to the world's misunderstanding of dreams, the misunderstanding of nothingness. Poor is the world, which solely my soul recites its poetry.
Yeah, that right there, like the way he finishes that is just so beautiful. Like he turns it back to himself. Like I'm like, wow, I'm a kid listening to this. And mind you, I don't have the grammar that I have now or the understanding that I have now. And I love this song. Like I really cried. This song saved me. And I didn't understand any of these words the way that I do now. But the melody and the harmony and the way that the sang and the words, they were so beautiful and colorful to me. And then he turns it back to himself. I'm like, wow. It still shocks me. I don't like it. It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's going from love to verses to dreams, right? So the verses is the things that written, and the dreams are the things that have their own life, right? Like they're not constrained by a body, right? Like they're separate, but still part of you. And then yeah, like he turns it to himself, right? Like he's changing which in solitude is which solely, right? Which is mean being alone, right? So there's an when I read solely, there's an element of choice, right? Like I could be with other people, but I'm not, right? Like I'm solely doing this. And now he's also taking ownership, right? It's not the soul, it's my soul. Right? So there's a shift there where maybe he was projecting things outwards, right? But
Yeah.
now he's taking it inside, like he's taking it to his own world, like his dreams, right? Like his aloneness and his poetry.
So on his poetry, so in the earlier verses, when the soul recites its poetry, it sounds like it's the poetry of the soul. Whereas in the end, my soul recites its poetry. It could also be read as now his soul is reading the world's poetry, and his poetry is being lost in his dreams.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Because it's still him. Right? That me being a kid and listening to the song, and of course I wanted to blame everything that happened to me. Right? That it's the fatalistic. I mean, the whole song is very fatalistic. But then my reflection on why would he do that? Like, why would someone put it back to them? It has always made me just always go back to the song. Yeah, but that's pretty good, friends.
It's less lonely now. It was the soul alone, and now it's my soul. So he found he found this the solution to him being alone, merging with his soul. Interesting.
Well, yeah, I want to say, right, like we've been skipping over the word. The sentence "poor is the world." I think in the end, right, like the world is missing out on him, while before it there was a sense of an impoverished world by the soul reciting its poetry, right? Like by the solitude of the soul. So like I think there's a flip happening there as well.
Yeah.
Michál, very beautiful song. Gorgeous.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Better
so
watch
much.
this a lot. Better watch this a lot.
With your free time.
Oh my God. Yes, it's a very, very good and serious sponsor that we all have. And we decide what to do with it. And maybe it shows us who we really are, the way we spend our sponsors' resources. And yeah, just guys, thank you again for participating, for analyzing the song. I feel like I learned something today, and it's amazing. Guys, subscribe to Manuel's podcast. I will provide the links on how to find and engage in conversations with Michál and Francois. And yeah, hope to see you in the next line by line. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
I thought we were waiting for Michál, but you can read the last chorus.
Oh, I spoke already.
It was a rhetorical question.
Oh,
You can speak
yeah.
more, Michál. You can speak way more.